My husband slipped me pills every night until one fake sleep exposed his dark secret. Lily had always believed that a quiet life was the hallmark of contentment. In a small town tucked between the hum of distant highways and the rustling forests, she and Daniel had forged a seemingly stable existence. Their days were patterned and predictable: morning coffee shared in the sunlit kitchen, errands at the local market, evenings spent in their modest living room with soft music playing and a book resting on her lap. For years, she had accepted this rhythm with a gentle heart, embracing the comfort of familiarity. But as the months wore on, a strange heaviness began to weigh on her, seeping into every moment like an unwelcome fog. She woke each morning feeling drained, her limbs reluctant to stretch, and her mind clouded with exhaustion that seemed disproportionate to the day's tasks. At first, Lily brushed it off. She told herself it was the stress of everyday life, the endless chores, the unspoken worries about their finances, the subtle loneliness that crept in after Daniel's long hours at work. She tried to take more walks, sip herbal tea, and get to bed earlier, but nothing relieved the pervasive weariness. Nights were especially troubling. Daniel, ever attentive, or so she thought, would quietly place a small white pill beside her glass of water before she slipped under the blankets. "Just something to help you rest," he'd say with a comforting smile, his eyes dark but soft. Lily hesitated only a moment. Tired as she was, she needed to trust him. After all, wasn't this what a husband did? Care for his wife when she was unwell? Gradually, the pills became a nightly ritual. Lily found herself more and more reliant on that small white tablet, sinking quickly into a heavy sleep that rarely felt refreshing. Sometimes, in the semi-conscious haze of dawn, she caught fleeting glimpses of Daniel's face, tense, almost unreadable. He would retreat to his study, closed off behind a heavy door, leaving her alone with her grogginess. Oddly, the distance between them grew each day, not just emotionally but in subtle, imperceptible gestures. He stopped sharing details about his work. His laughter, once a frequent melody in their home, waned. Even his embrace lost warmth. Yet, despite these signs, Lily's trust lingered. She gave him the benefit of every doubt because that was her nature, hopeful, forgiving, and steadfast. But then came the evening when everything shifted, the night when her gut twisted with a cold apprehension she could no longer ignore. Daniel had left the usual pill on her nightstand, and as he turned to leave, Lily decided she wouldn't swallow it whole this time. Instead, she feigned deep sleep, eyes closed, breath steady, heart pounding beneath her ribs. She sensed his hesitation, the pause at the doorway, before the faint sound of footsteps retreating down the hall. Hidden in the shadow of the doorway, she waited with sharp, watchful eyes. Then, through the muted silence, Lily caught fragments of a hushed conversation, Daniel's voice low and urgent, speaking to someone beyond the door about keeping her compliant and making sure she doesn't wake too early. A surge of cold dread surged through her veins. Was this really the man she had trusted with her heart? The husband she once believed would protect her above all else? Her instincts screamed at her to uncover the truth buried beneath the exhaustion, behind the pills, and beneath the surface of their quiet home. The question that had quietly gnawed at her now screamed in the darkness: what was Daniel hiding? And how far would he go to keep his secrets safe? Lily's mind raced as she laid still, her heart heavy but resolute. She realized that tonight was not just another restless night, it was the beginning of a revelation that would challenge everything she thought she knew about her marriage, her safety, and herself. Was she ready to confront the shadows that crept through their lives, or would she remain trapped by the pills and silence? In that lingering moment of silence, she made a quiet promise to herself: she would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Have you ever sensed that something familiar was hiding shadows just beneath the surface, waiting to be unveiled? It's often our courage to face those shadows that defines who we truly are. The following days were a labyrinth of conflicting emotions for Lily. Each morning, she awoke with the same relentless weariness, but now beneath it throbbed a steady pulse of unease. Daniel's behavior, once obscured by habit and comfort, began to unravel piece by piece before her watchful eyes. His smiles became tighter, the way he averted his gaze whenever she brought up her concerns left a bitter taste swirling in her mind. But still, she kept silent, gathering strength and clues in equal measure. Somewhere deep within, a fierce resolve was kindling, a silent vow that she would no longer be the passive observer of her own life. Days turned into restless nights spent replaying the fragments of whispered words she'd overheard. Keeping her compliant echoed ominously in her memories. Her fingers itched to uncover what exactly Daniel was hiding, to understand his motives, to reclaim her agency. One evening, with trembling hands and a heart pounding like a war drum, she examined the small white pills carefully. They were unlabeled, their origins unclear. How long had she been ingesting these mysterious capsules, surrendering her consciousness to a man she barely recognized anymore? Fear mingled with anger. It wasn't merely the physical slump these pills caused, but the invisible chains tightening around her soul. Lily began probing subtly, planting questions amid casual conversations, a doctor's appointment disguised as concern for her health, hopeful for answers. But Daniel deflected each inquiry with practiced ease, his tone calm but laced with an undercurrent of impatience. "You're just tired, Lily. Stress gets to everyone," he would say, his smile brittle, eyes flickering just a fraction too quickly. His denials collided with his nighttime routines. Each time he offered her the pill, she felt the walls closing in, that sinister undercurrent that had seemed invisible before now thrumming beneath the surface. It was no longer just a matter of unexplained fatigue, it was the creeping realization of control, of manipulation laced with dependency. Amid this tangled web of suspicion and doubt, Lily's support system began to fray. Friends and family, who once offered comfort, started to distance themselves, their remarks tinged with unspoken judgments. "Maybe you're just imagining things," they would say, or worse, "you need to find peace in your marriage." Although well-intentioned, their words left Lily isolated, her voice muffled within a chorus of disbelief. At work, her focus waned, and rumors about her fragile state began to circulate. The very people who once admired her gentle strength now regarded her as fragile, as dependent, as somehow less than who she was. Yet, beneath the exhaustion and the mounting isolation, Lily nurtured a hidden fire. In stolen moments, she journaled her experiences, pinning down every fleeting thought, every suspicious glance, attempting to reclaim her narrative. She started attending a small support group under a guise of stress relief, connecting with women who had tasted betrayal in its many forms. Their stories mirrored shards of her own, reinforcing a vital truth: she was not alone, and the shadows that cloaked her marriage could be fought. One evening, emboldened and weary in equal parts, Lily prepared for a plan, one born from the fragile threads of hope and the raw edges of fear. She would feign sleep once more, but this time would be ready. Hidden in the depths of the darkened room, she placed a small recording device beneath her pillow, hoping to capture Daniel's next move. The hours dragged interminably, each creak of the house amplified by the pounding of her heart. Then, just as the clock inched past midnight, she heard the doorframe creak, familiar footsteps padding softly toward the bedroom. The voice that whispered her name wasn't warm or loving, it was cold, methodical, chilling. Lily held her breath, straining to hear. Daniel muttered quietly, "She's been more resistant lately. I'll have to step up the doses. Can't have her slipping away from me now." The cold calculation in his tone shattered the last remnants of denial in Lily's soul. This was no longer about care or concern. It was domination masked as concern, control disguised as love. Conflicted, scared, yet burning with newfound clarity, Lily realized this twisted game couldn't continue. The stakes were higher than she'd imagined, far beyond the waiting world of whispered lies and fleeting smiles. Tomorrow would demand a choice that could shatter everything she'd known or bind her even deeper. Have you ever faced a decision where the cost of knowing the truth feels as perilous as remaining in the dark? For Lily, that moment was fast approaching. Would you find the courage to face it head-on? In the days that followed, the house felt less like a home and more like a carefully crafted trap. Lily moved through the rooms with heightened senses, each creak in the floorboards and every shadow thrown by the dimmed lights magnifying her unease. She had recorded Daniel's chilling confession, the audio a damning testament to his sinister intentions. Yet, the weight of exposing the truth bore down heavily on her. How would she confront the man she had once loved? What would remain of her life once the darkness came to light? Daniel's demeanor grew increasingly calculated. He seemed to notice the change in Lily's attitude, the subtle wariness in her gaze, the occasional hesitations before accepting his insistent offers of the pills. His smiles became colder, his words sharper. One evening, when Lily declined the usual tablet, the atmosphere between them shifted palpably. His eyes, once pools of understanding, flashed with an icy sharpness, and his voice lowered to a dangerous whisper. "You're making this very difficult for me, Lily. You don't know what's best for you." Fear punctuated by sorrow cascaded through her body. She recognized then that the man she married had metamorphosed into a stranger, a puppeteer eager to tighten his grip. The very idea of escape seemed risky, fraught with unknown consequences. But retreat was no longer an option. Gathering the small network of her support, Lily shared fragments of her ordeal in hushed tones. The faces that once showed doubt now reflected concern and determination. A close friend, Mara, offered her unwavering support, accompanying her to the local authorities and helping gather evidence of Daniel's manipulations and other dark secrets hinted at in whispered warnings. Rumors within the town started surfacing, murmurings about Daniel's involvement in illicit activities, relationships veiled in deceit, and a web of lies that extended far beyond their household. Each revelation carved away the veneer of respectability Daniel had carefully maintained. The facade shattered, revealing a man intertwined with manipulation and control not just over Lily, but over others too. Her heart pounded with a mix of vindication and grief. The man she thought she knew was a master of deception, concealing layers of malice that had festered beneath his charm. The most harrowing moment came when Lily confronted Daniel in a public setting, a gathering of friends and acquaintances disguised as a casual dinner party. With a steady voice and unwavering gaze, she laid bare the evidence, the recordings, the medications, the betrayals. Gasps echoed through the room, some faces etched with disbelief, others with shame. Daniel's mask slipped, his confident demeanor fracturing as accusations mounted. He stumbled, anger flaring in his eyes, but the truth refused to be silenced. The aftermath was a whirlwind of legal battles, whispered condemnations, and the slow unraveling of a life built on lies. Daniel's presence receded from Lily's world, replaced by the steady rhythm of healing and reclamation. Yet, the scars ran deep, not mere marks of pain, but enduring reminders of resilience and courage. Through the turmoil, Lily discovered strengths she never imagined. Her intuition, once dismissed as mere fatigue or paranoia, had been a lifeline. The quiet voice inside her, insisting she look deeper and demand truth, became the beacon guiding her toward freedom. Now, as she began piecing together fragments of a new life, Lily found herself standing at a crossroads, aware that the path ahead would be challenging but illuminated by the hard-earned light of her own empowerment. Would she let fear define her, or would she embrace the fierce woman who dared to defy the darkness? Have you ever faced a moment when the truth, no matter how painful, promises liberation? Lily's journey shows that courage in the face of betrayal can forge a path to profound strength. What would you choose when confronted with such a choice? The days that followed Lily's discovery felt like walking through a maze without a clear exit. Each morning, she woke with the heavy certainty that she was no longer safe under the same roof as Daniel. Her mind raced with the gravity of what she had unearthed, the pills that line her nights, the whispered conversations hinting at dark plans, the coldness behind the man she once trusted most. The recording device beneath her pillow had captured more than just voice. It had caught raw intent, manipulation, and control masked under the guise of care. But wielding such evidence held risks she had yet to fully grasp. Daniel's behavior shifted alarmingly. He sensed the undercurrent of suspicion growing between them, and though his smile still flickered with practiced ease, a dangerous edge crept into his gaze. One evening, as Lily resisted taking the pill, the air thickened with a silence that screamed warning. His voice, low and threatening, broke the quiet. "You don't know what's good for you anymore, Lily. If you keep fighting this, it will only get worse." The room felt colder, shadows lengthening as fear wrapped around her chest. The man who promised protection was now a figure of menace. Despite the fear, Lily's resolve crystallized. She could no longer be complicit in her own erasure. Gathering strength from the embers of her courage, she reached out cautiously to Mara, her closest friend, sharing what she could with code and care. Trust was fragile but necessary. Together, they began piecing together the fragments of Daniel's other secrets, rumors murmured by neighbors about his hidden dealings, whispered warnings about his manipulations with other women, and a network of lies that stretched beyond their quiet home. The realization was devastating. Daniel's supremacy over her was just one thread in a darker tapestry woven with deceit and control. The pills were tools of domination, designed not just to subdue but to erase dissent, to build a cage without bars. But beneath the surface, Lily's fire blazed brighter. She was no longer a passive victim, she was an adversary preparing for the fight of her life. Late into the nights, she compiled her evidence, spoke with counselors, and prepared for confrontation. A plan formed, a truth she would no longer let be buried beneath silence. The turning point came during a gathering with friends and acquaintances, a setting too public for Daniel's calculated manipulations. With her voice steady and eyes unwavering, Lily presented the recorded proof. The room fell into a thick silence as she revealed the sinister undercurrents of their marriage. Faces registered shock, disbelief, then dawning understanding. Daniel's mask cracked, indignation and anger flared but could not extinguish the brutal honesty of her claims. In that moment, Lily reclaimed her voice. Her bravery shattered the illusion, exposing the toxic web of control that Daniel had spun. The exposure ignited ripples beyond their household. Friends, family, and authorities were forced to reckon with the truth, and the tide began turning. Legal measures were initiated, support systems activated, and slowly, the house that once felt like a prison started to release its grip. Yet, healing was neither swift nor simple. The battle to reclaim autonomy wove through bruised heartbeats and shattered trust, but Lily's spirit remained unbroken. She found solace in her own strength and those who stood beside her. Her journey illuminated the power of awareness, the unyielding will to resist, and the enduring truth that freedom begins with claiming one's own voice. As Lily prepared to close this painful chapter and step toward a renewed life, she wondered, in your own struggle, what truths are you holding back? And what courage might emerge when you decide to face them head-on?